Even with a program like Excel, there are going to be times when we need to have a printed copy of workbooks. Maybe we just want to share a particular report or a particular range of data with colleagues, with your supervisor, with financial decision makers, whatever the case may be. The thing is, your workbooks can contain multiple worksheets, and those multiple worksheets could contain thousands of data entries, formulas, results. You don't necessarily want to print all of it. You just want to print, what's necessary to deliver the critical information. If you think about it, you might have a graph or a chart that's actually obtaining its information from multiple worksheets within the workbook. You don't want to print out everything. And that's especially the case with Excel. So this chapter, we're going to deal with printing workbooks. How do we preview and print? How do we set up page layouts? And then how do we configure headers and footers? In this first topic, we are going to look at how to preview and print workbooks. Most information is going to be digital today, but there are occasions where we need to print up hard copies. Okay? Spreadsheets are not the same as most documents, so there's a little bit more to it here just because of the way that the spreadsheet is laid out. You can access all of the commands and settings that you'll need to print your workbook by hitting the File tab in the ribbon to get to the Backstage view. Within the Backstage view, on the left, you'll see the print options, and then on the right, we'll see all of the options that we have available. So there's print commands up top that, just the button to print, and then how many copies do we want. There's the printer that I want to use, so there's going to be a drop-down menu there that shows the printer. It'll be your default printer automatically, but you can modify that. And then beneath there you have all manner of print settings, okay? And we'll discuss these here shortly. Page setup, and then the print preview pane. So every time you're choosing an option, you can see a dynamic preview of what it is going to look like. You'll need to adjust some of the print settings before you print, and the settings section of the print screen has all the commands that you would use to configure general print settings for a workbook. These will appear with different text depending on the current selection. That's just kind of an FYI. So you have your print selection settings. In other words, what do you want to print? Okay. Are you going to print all sheets? Are you only going to print the active sheet? Are you only going to print a particular range? You can make all of those choices. Then you have the duplexing settings. Duplexing is one-side versus double-sided. All right, that's all it is. Collating is if you have multiple sheets, do you need to put them together, group them? So page 1, 2, and 3, page 1, 2, and 3. Orientation settings, portrait or landscape, pretty standard. The paper sizes, the margins, and then the scaling settings. All of these are going to be available in that print settings area. Then we have page orientation. That's a page layout setting. Basically just determines the general overall layout of each printed page. This setting also specifies whether we should be doing it in portrait or landscape, and that's what you can see the difference. And often in spreadsheets, landscape is better. In fact, most of the times it's the default, but if for whatever reason you want to change it to portrait, then you are able to do that with the page orientation settings. In addition to page orientation, we have page margins. These are the margins are just the little invisible boundaries that define exactly where particular content is on a printed worksheet. So they tell us how much space, right? So we have the header margin, we have the top margin, you have your side margin, which is that area of space, the bottom, the footer. So everything in a spreadsheet has its own place. Even some of these hidden areas that we wouldn't necessarily know were there, you start increasing the margin settings, and then you'll see that the effect that that's going to have. There are a lot of different options when it comes to printing, and it's nice to be able to see it before you do it. And so the print preview is for that. It makes it very easy for us to make adjustments, and then we see those settings on the fly. Okay, you've got some navigation controls where you can bounce page to page. You can hit the Show Margins button, and it will actually show the fields that we were seeing before. And then, of course, at all times you can preview the page, but I'm sorry, you have the Zoom to Page button as well. That's the last one that just toggles between two different magnification levels. So as we've been talking about, there are going to be times when you want to print documents, and so in this demonstration we're going to look at configuring and previewing a print job. We have a sales data final. It's listed here. It's got all the formatting in there, and we want to print this. So in order to do that, you are just simply going to go up to the File tab, click on File, and that takes us to the Backstage view, and then we select the Print tab here in the navigation pane. At that point, it's going to be just looking to see what printers I have installed. Notice it immediately shows me a preview. All right. The printers that you have installed are going to show up here. The green check mark denotes a default printer. I don't actually have a local printer, so I just have the print to PDF, so I'm going to leave that. And then we have various settings. Okay. Again, we can preview over here. We've got navigation buttons that will jump through the different pages in the spreadsheet, so you can see how it's kind of laid out. And we can see right away that that's not really going to work for me, right? First off, do you want to collate? Yes, I do want to collate. And then we probably want to get away from the portrait orientation. In most cases, when we switch it to landscape, it then adjusts, and you can see we now have the majority of what we need. But maybe we want more. So we go down and we can modify the scaling options and just say we want to fit all the columns on one page. Okay? And obviously it's then going to adjust, and it's smaller, but we can still see that now we're actually seeing the entire spreadsheet. Another way that we can control is to adjust the margins. So we can select the margin button down here just to show margins. Okay, and then with the margins shown, you can just kind of change, if you want, the way that this looks. All right, so we've got the header, this. Okay, so you can see how you can adjust the margins just by grabbing. It's either going to be down or it's going to be the, and then you get the header and footer margins. All right, so like I said, I mean, we can make the changes to that just to kind of adjust. That didn't really do a whole lot, but you are able to adjust those margins if you want. Let's just drag this way up. It will move it way up. And there we go. We select Show Margins to turn that off. And again, if you want to make any other changes, such as the number of active sheets, the number of copies up here, those are all different options. That's going to complete this demonstration where we looked at creating a print job and previewing that print job. In this topic, we're going to look at setting up the page layout. Although your general print settings, that gives you a good foundation to print your workbooks. There's a lot more you can do when printing with Excel, and it can be highly complex because and there are a large number of reasons for that. So you might need to fine tune, and that's what we'll look at with the page setup dialog box. The page setup dialog box gives you more options for configuring your workbooks than the print settings in the Backstage view. This dialog box is organized into 4 tabs, and they all contain task-related commands and settings having to do with printing. Okay, the page setup dialog box, you can select the link at the bottom of the settings section, which is in print on the Backstage View screen, but you also have a page layout ribbon tab that you can use to access this. Okay, as we can see here with page selected, you have the page tab, that gives us commands to set the page orientation, magnification level. You have the margins tab, which is clearly for margins, headers and footers. The sheet tab, this current sheet, and then there is an options button down below that'll show you the properties for the current printer, the printer driver, and those kinds of things. The print area feature allows you to select specific cells and ranges to print from within the workbook. So instead of just going into print settings and then having to choose, we can click and drag. Okay. Once you've set a print area, then only those cells in the print area are going to print. They will appear surrounded by a thin gray border. You can expand the print area, you can add more cells to it, or you can remove from it until you select the exact data that you would like to print. Excel worksheets often have thousands of columns, rows worth of data, so it can be difficult for people to interpret the printed worksheets if you only have column and row labels on the first page. Okay, so there's a feature in Excel that allows us to determine which rows and columns will print on every page. It's the print titles command. So the print titles command, you can save worksheet viewers the necessity of flipping back to see what the column headings were, because you can just repeat the column headings every time. And so you see there rows to repeat at the top, columns to repeat at the top. These are the rows and columns that will be repeated on every single page. Sometimes scaling your worksheets up or down to fit the desired number of pages doesn't quite give you the results you're looking for, so you might want to manually tell Excel where one printed page ends and another begins. And to do that, you can insert page breaks. These are basically just boundaries that divide the worksheet pages for the purposes of printing. It doesn't do anything with the data, it just makes it a page break. And Excel lets you insert and delete specific page breaks and remove all page breaks in a given workstation, or in a given worksheet, if you want to. You might not have realized it yet, but you've probably been looking at your Excel workbooks in normal view, because that's the default workbook view in 2019, but there are other pre-configured workbook views that display the user interface and the worksheet in a completely different way. And so it's a good idea to just at least take a look at these. These are on the View tab in the ribbon in the Workbook Views section. But just take a look at it, because you can maybe find a layout that you like better than the normal view. So here's the page break view. This is ideal for inserting and deleting, arranging page breaks. In this view, the default page breaks will show up as blue dashed lines, whereas anything you do manually is going to appear as a solid blue line. If you want to move them around, then you just simply click on them and then move. So left click and drag them to the desired location. Okay, if you move a default page break, it is going to create a manual page break. All right, so now we've previewed the sales data worksheet. That kind of gives us a better idea of some of the changes we might make to the layout before we print the pages. The column labels, for instance, printing on each page would be easier to read. Okay? That really doesn't matter what data you're looking at. And then some of the other information, that supplementary information, it really isn't relevant to the audience. So we can define a print area. We can exclude that part of the worksheet. All right. We can also adjust where the pages will break. So this is going to be good because really trying to fit it all on one screen, that really wasn't, that wasn't the greatest. So let's go up and we'll start with the page layout. And so the demo is just setting up a page layout. We'll go to the page layout tab. And then we're just going to look at this page setup area. Okay, and basically everything that we need to do is going to be done here. One of which is print the titles. Okay? And so it opens up the sheet, and you can just then choose exactly what you want. So print titles, and then here are the rows that we want to repeat at the top. So we can simply select that, and then we can just grab that individual row. Okay. And so, it's then going to make that change for me, and that's what's going to repeat. Are there columns that we want to repeat on the left? Well, in this case, the answer is no. So we're just going to press OK. All right, and now it's going to freeze. Now, we also want to define a print area, so that's up here. Just select print area, and we can just say then we want to set the print area. All right. Oh. Well, we can't do that because we hadn't selected exactly what we wanted. So basically then we're just going to go like this, and we're going to define that. So we make the selection. That's what we want for the print area. Set print area. That's all I'm going to print. All right? So that's fairly easy. And we can just deselect that range. Now on the View tab, we can take a look at a workbook view here known as the page break preview. And so at that point, we can kind of see where the page breaks are going to be. And then all we have to do is drag this up. So if we want to split this, so I've got 54 rows as opposed to having all of them, most of them on one page, we can just kind of drag this up around here, 26, and then that's now adjusted the page breaks. All right. Before we finish, let's preview and make sure that this actually looks like what we were expecting. And now we can see we've got the sales ledger. We've got and then if we shoot to page 2, looks very similar, but it also repeats those column names. All right, so we've repeated those because we defined that, and it's not printing that additional information because we really decided we didn't need that. All right, so that's going to complete the demonstration where we looked at setting up a page layout. In this topic, we're going to look at configuring headers and footers. So we've set up a page layout, but we may still want to enhance our printed worksheets by putting footer information in there, just numbering a page. Having a header that has the company name and the date of the workbook. All of these things can just make it a little bit easier to look at that data. So headers and footers are little content placeholders that just display additional information or images in certain Excel views and on printed pages. Headers show up at the top of a page. A footer shows up at the bottom of the page. Now, these are worksheet specific, so you do have to configure them for each worksheet in a workbook individually. There are also a number of pre-configured headers and footers. You do have the option of creating your own, but in many cases you can just use the existing data that is there. You can also create different headers and footers for odd and even pages. You can exclude them from the first page. You can create unique headers and footers across all pages. So there are a lot of different options. The page layout view is going to show you the worksheets as they would print on separate pages based on the current settings. Okay, so when you select the page layout view, it just automatically displays rulers, and these are going to be on the top and the left side. It's automatically going to show you your header section, your footers, your margins, going to show you all of that. When you do this page layout, it makes it easier to just click in the headers and footers area to be able to make modifications. The headers and footer tools tab is one example of something we call a contextual tab. Contextual tabs are little temporary ribbon tabs that display commands for working with a particular type of worksheet content. So when you select that particular type of content, then Excel will automatically create this temporary. And you can see it added at the end. You know, it's got picture tools in gray above it. And so it shows you, as we said, what's called a contextual tab. And we'll see a few more of these. This is the headers and footers contextual tab. So when you select a header or footer placeholder in the page layout view, then you'll get this additional tab that shows up. And clearly there are a lot of different options. You're designing the header or the footer, your page numbers, your date and time. You can insert different elements into it very easily. Over on your options, you see the options for how often to repeat it and on what pages, etc. So just, we talk about this because we want to make sure that we see that this additional ribbon tab became available just because we selected header. You also have the dialog box. The dialog box is an alternative to the contextual tab. You can access the dialog boxes by hitting the custom header or custom footer buttons within the page layout. So, and then at this point, you basically just, you've got left, you've got center, you've got the elements that you can add, you have the fonts, and you have instructions on doing that. You have different tabs for first page header, odd page header, even page header, just an alternative way. So, it's really no reason to choose one over the other than personal preference. In this demonstration, we're going to look at configuring headers and footers for our workbook. So we can include things like the date of the sales meeting, a title for the workbook, page numbers, etc. Now on the page layout tab, you have information about the layouts. You do have information here on the sheets where their headings are going to show up. Over on the View tab and page layout, you have the same kind of options. What do you want to actually show up? But then if we were just to select that we want to do headers and footers, we can just type head. That'll take us to a header and footer design tab. All right. And so then here on the headers and footers, I'm actually going to be able to put what I want. So here's the title that we're going to have. And then we can hit tab over to the next box on the right, and we're just going to say U.S. sales, right? So we've got the company name, and then we've got U.S. sales, and there's the header over here as well. And so you can make changes. So actually, let's do that. Let's just copy all of that, or actually cut it out of there, and we're going to put that over here. Oh, somehow. We got out of our view there, so let's go back. There we go. So we're going to copy that. We're going Shift-Tab. We're just using keyboard shortcuts here, okay? And then if any time you want to get back in, you just right-click, select that cell, and you should be able to get back into it. But you can put whatever other changes you want to make. Okay. Now on that, I'm not really sure why that keeps disappearing for me. That tab. Okay. So over here, for instance, if I want just the current date, then I just put in from the header and footer elements. I put in the current date. And then we can go to footer, and that's going to take me down to the footer. And at the footer, I can say, okay, we're just going to include the page number, okay? Or page number and number of pages, stuff like that. All right, and so you can make those changes and then just simply save, or go back over here to File, to Print. It'll show the print preview. We've got our page breaks, and now we've got information in there. Now, showing the column headings and row headings. We're not going to do that, but other than that, looks pretty good. So let's actually go back to View and say we don't want to show the headings and we don't want to show the grid lines, and so then you can kind of see the difference that's going to make. Looks like it was doing column headings for me on that one, not the headers. All right, so it looks good. That's going to complete the demonstration for configuring headers and footers. So in this chapter, we looked at printing workbooks. We discussed the need to still produce hard copies of data. Often that data is contained on multiple worksheets or just in an individual part of a workbook, and so we need to be able to choose the correct option. So we looked at the tools that Excel provides to allow you to preview and print workbooks. We talked about page layout settings, as well as configuring headers and footers. Also that when you print the data, it's just going to be a little bit easier for you and for other individuals that are viewing it to utilize that data. In this chapter, we're going to look at managing workbooks as a whole. So far, we've largely worked just within the workbooks, within the worksheets, trying to enter data, view data, analyze, format. But there's more to being proficient with Excel than simply working within the workbooks. So we may need to manage things like the structure of worksheets. We may need to modify views within the workbook. We need to know how to find the workbook that you need, when you need it. All of that's pretty critical, and it's something that you're going to need to do from time to time and going to be the focus of this chapter. In this first topic, we'll look at managing worksheets. Workbooks with just a few worksheets are pretty easy to manage without a whole lot of effort, but what if you have a dozen worksheets? What if you have 30, 40? You want to be able to clearly identify them, clearly recognize them, arrange them in the right order, and then possibly remove worksheets from time to time. But by default, when you open up a new Excel workbook, it's going to have one worksheet. You can technically add as many worksheets as you want. It's just going to be based on what your computer's processor and memory really support. And then if you don't need all of the worksheets that you've added to a workbook, you can delete the ones that you aren't using. There's fairly easy ways to do that. We can see the tabs selected, and they are formatted just to help them stand out, which would not be a default. But you can right-click those tabs, and then you're going to see a number of different options in the context menu. Right? So if you right-click New Sheet button, then it inserts a new worksheet. If you right-click any tab and then choose Insert, it is going to insert a worksheet there as well. And you can also use the Insert ribbon key. So you can add and delete. You can just right-click and choose Delete if you wanted to delete it, or it's in the Cells group on the Home tab. By default, worksheet tabs are just going to be gray, or the color of formatting that you have for your Excel window. And they're also just going to have generic names, like Sheet 1, Sheet 2, Sheet 3. It's really easy to rename them. You do not have to add any formatting. You can just right-click and choose Rename. However, you can also do what we've done here, where U.S., Canada, and Mexico are clearly formatted, in a different way. If you want to move them, there are a couple of different methods. Put your location, left click and drag the tab, and then you'll see the location marker light up. That's where it's going to place the tab or the sheet if you want to, if you drop it right there. The second method for doing it would be to use the Move or Copy dialog box. So you can reposition worksheets within the same workbook. You can even move worksheets to another open workbook, create a brand new workbook, and import them into the Move or Copy dialog box. Is going to give you all those options. We can see that Move or Copy dialog box here. Notice to select a sheet, right click, and then choose Move, or use Move or Copy sheet from the ribbon. And then we just have to choose either this book or another book, and then where we want to put it. If we want to create a separate copy that then you're going to rename and just change data, I've done that plenty, then you can just create a copy. And then as soon as the copied worksheet is created, you would go and right click and you would rename it. Some of the worksheets have information in them that shouldn't be visible to others, maybe even not in a saved format like a payroll worksheet. So if you want to hide some of them, you can use this hide and unhide option. Now there's other ways that we're going to need to do this because we want to make sure that other users can't just go in here and unhide. We'll discuss those at a later time, but here it is pretty easy. Okay, you can just choose the cells group from the Home tab, and then you're in your format options. There's going to be a hide and unhide, as we see there, and then you can choose whether you want to hide rows, columns, sheet, unhide those things that have been hidden. And the only way that you'll know that this happens is, for instance, on columns, you might go from A to C instead of A to B. So you know that B is there, it's just been hidden. And that is the way that you can make some information that maybe is just feeding the data in a table on your worksheet. Some of that information that's feeding it doesn't necessarily have to be visible. In this demonstration, we're going to look at managing worksheets. So here we have our U.S. sales ledger. Okay, this was the ledger that we've worked on several times here, but there are a couple of additional sheets now. The additional sheets are the Canada sales ledger and the Mexico sales ledger. They're set up the same way, but we just want to do some of your worksheet management that we kind of talked about, make this a little bit easier. So if we select sheet 1 and then we just right click, we're going to be able to choose rename. And so that's a pretty easy process. Just hit tab to go to the next sheet, and then we can do the same thing. Right? So as you can probably imagine, we're going to just label these. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Okay, so that already allows them to stand out, but you can adjust coloring as well. So let's right-click the U.S. and notice we've got tab color here, and we're just going to make this red. Okay, for Canada, tab color, we're going to go blue, and then for Mexico, we'll pick something else. Well, let's go with green. All right. No real rhyme or reason behind those colors, but notice that allows them to stand out even more. Okay, so you could actually stand to reason that we should probably make this one red because it's got the red, and then the U.S. has the blue, so you can kind of match those up so it's a little bit more visually appealing as well. And again, you're not going to get the full color of it unless it's not a selected tab. So we can see that that kind of changes the display. Now you can also copy these if you'd like. So let's right-click this Canada tab, and we're going to choose Move or Copy. All right. Then it asks, where do you want to move it? Are we moving it within this workbook? Are we moving it in another workbook? And so we're just going to say, move to the end, and basically I just want you to create a copy. Okay. It's okay. We got now Canada 2. We're going to right-click this, rename that to Europe. And that's just another thing where you can easily copy, and you're copying everything. Notice formatting and everything. And all I have to do is go up here and then make changes to this. So the other formatting and all of the calculations and all of that, it's all still there. Now, obviously, I'm going to have to replace the data that is in here, but that's fine. Okay. We can change the color here of the font. Let's change it to just a different color. We'll go orange. And then we can go and modify that tab color as well to match. Okay. All right, so now we've created that. Now, in addition to this, we can just create additional worksheets. So I can just hit that I want to add that. Actually, before we do this, let's go here with all of these actual values. And then we're just going to press the delete key, okay? Because we're going to remove all of that. We have information to put in there. So let's go back then to sheet 2, and what we're going to do is we're going to hold down, or I'm going to rename this first. This is going to be our employee summary. And right now, we don't need to use either of these tabs. So to make things easier, I'm going to hold down Shift, left-click. That groups them together, and then I can just hide them. Okay, so now they're not shown. Now I do need to know that they are hidden, but they're not shown. So now we've got the ability, or we've seen the ability here to rename, to color code, to create multiple tabs, and to hide individual worksheets. In this next topic, we're going to look at managing workbook and worksheet views. It's probably understandable that if you're dealing with very large worksheets, they can be pretty difficult to read, right? Because they have to scroll down vertically and sometimes also horizontally. You can't always see the column labels. So that's kind of what we're going to help remedy here. Because by leveraging the different view options, then you can easily review data from different sources simultaneously. You can copy and paste data to the correct location, shouldn't have any errors, and that ultimately is going to save you a lot of time and headaches because I don't then have to scroll through endless rows and columns of data. Now, we've already encountered some pre-configured workbook views, the normal view, the page break view, the page layout. It's possible, I should say, that none of these would meet your needs. So you can create custom views. Custom views save all your print settings along with any display settings that you have on a worksheet. Now they are worksheet specific, so you'll have to create them for each worksheet in a workbook, but you can create even multiple custom views and apply them to the same worksheet. All the custom views that you have saved for a particular worksheet will be displayed here in custom views, which you get from the view tab, and there's a workbook views section, and then you choose custom view. When you use the Add button in the Custom View dialog box, then you get another dialog box. This just allows you to create and save custom views. Just give it a name, decide whether or not to include print settings and hidden rows. So we could create a view, for instance, that just, this was with hidden and this was without hidden. Probably want a better name. Something to identify that view will apply the hidden rows and will not show them. So that's one option that you have in the custom dialog box. If you need to view various sections of the same worksheet simultaneously, you can use the split command. That command is just going to divide the worksheet into either 2 separate panes vertically or horizontally, or into 4 separate panes to allow you to view up to 4 different places in the worksheet at the same time. And if you think about this, this could be very beneficial if your data is stored in different places that are not, able to be seen in the same view. So we can utilize that split command also on the View tab. We've already seen how with print settings it can be helpful to make sure that column and row labels print on the same page. Well, when you're not printing, you don't have that page-by-page option necessarily, but you can make that happen by freezing certain panes. So when I freeze, in this case, the rows 1 through 4, it will then allow me to scroll down in the worksheet. And while all the other cells will scroll normally and the data in them, that title will not scroll, okay? So rows 1 through 4, they won't scroll vertically. Columns A and B are frozen and won't scroll horizontally. So even if I go over further to the right and see more data, I'll still be able to identify the employee and the region that was in. So this is a good example of a place where we would very much need the freeze pane option. Also in the View tab, in the Window command group, okay, we have a freeze panes there, and we'll be able to use that. You can just freeze top row, freeze first column. Those are some default ones. You can select something and unfreeze the pane. Basically, you just need to make sure your selection is everything that you want to freeze in the same way, vertically and or horizontally. By default, all of your open workbooks in Excel are going to appear in their own separate window. And you can manually resize and you can arrange the windows individually to view them on the screen at once, of course. Windows 10, you can click and kind of drag and it'll automatically try to do it. But there's another option in Excel. It's a little bit easier. It's the Arrange All command. So it provides you a number of different options. You can see this here in View right above Freeze Panes in the Window group. Just click Arrange All. And when you select that, you're going to get a couple of different options in the Arrange All dialog box. So you can select the desired view option for Arrange All command here in this box. It automatically displays this box, so the two are linked to one another. So you're going to click on it, you're going to see this dialog box, and then we can choose whether we want to arrange windows tiled, horizontal, vertical, cascade. Now tiled, it's just showing you the top portion of each individual window. Horizontal, it will take up the horizontal space. Vertical, it'll stack them on top of one another, but you should be able to see them. And then cascade is basically just enough for the title bar of the workbook to be selected. And that's just so that you can quickly click between them as opposed to doing maybe an Alt-Tab whole window switch. So when Excel opens up as a whole window, it might be easier to arrange the workbook's worksheets within the same Excel user interface. The View Side-by-Side command is sort of a cross, sort of a combination of the Split command and the Arrange All command. So basically what it lets you do is view worksheets from two different workbooks side by side for easy comparison. Okay? Synchronous scroll bars are a really helpful thing that an option that you can choose there in the window group. So this is it's just kind of a default. It will scroll both automatically. By default, you can control that. If you don't want it doing that, then just clear the synchronous scrolling. The Switch Windows command allows you to easily switch among multiple open workbooks. So this way, you can change which open workbook you want to view without having to minimize or manually arrange the windows. So it can be helpful when you select the Cascade option earlier in the Arrange Windows dialog box. You can use Switch command and quickly access that same option. The new Window command enables you to open another instance. So, of any workbook, just if you want to view different parts, maybe side by side. So you have a workbook open, and then you go to view in the window group, and you say you want to go to a new window. And so at that point, then you can arrange all, do the side by side, and you can look at them together. In this demonstration, we're going to look at managing workbook views as well as worksheet views. Sometimes when these spreadsheets get very large, it's just a good idea to be able to compare and contrast. All right, so we've got our workbook open here, and let's just first look at splitting the workbook window into different parts, so you can view different parts of the worksheet together. Okay, so let's go over and get into US on row 16 here, and go up to the View tab, and in your View window, or in your window command group, I should say, we're just going to choose the split option. Okay. Then in the bottom pane, we can scroll down, and basically you can compare. You can see. I'll just move this a little bit. Okay, row 15 stays stagnant, and so now I can actually look at what is in row 54 and compare it. All right, there is that comparison. So it splits the window into two. Now that's a toggle, so you can turn that off to switch back to a normal view. How about a couple of different workbooks? Okay, well, we can go in here, and we're going to open up this other workbook. So once we have that open, then again back to the window. Well, it's coming here, but you can see how we have a new window. Go ahead and enable editing there. So on view, you've got new window, you've got arrange all, split hide, you've got view side by side. Here's our view side by side, and again, I might need a little bit of a bigger monitor, but notice it's synchronizing those. Okay, and you can adjust if it helps. You can also hide the ribbon, for instance. That's going to make things easier, right? And so we can see how those are going. It is using synchronous scrolling. You do not have to do that. You can toggle that on or off. If you don't have it on, then as you scroll, it's not going to scroll the other. Synchronous will link the two together. Okay. So that's just, you have all of those options on the View tab in the window group as we've been discussing. Let's just close sales data. But one of the other things that we might want to do will be to exercise the ability to freeze panes. So just click on one of these tabs. That'll extend the ribbon. I'm going to pin it back. I just took it away momentarily there. So you basically just are going to pick a cell that you want to freeze. Okay, so I'm going to go with C5, and then we're going to hit the View tab, and then we're going to go and say we want to freeze panes. Okay. And you basically then it's just going to freeze everything above, right? So we did C5 because we want our regions to move because that's part of the data set. But everything above, I don't want any of it to scroll. And so we can see how the freeze panes option works there. Just select unfreeze panes when you are done with it. So that's going to complete the demonstration. We just looked at a couple of different ways to view multiple worksheets and workbooks. In this topic, we're going to look at managing workbook properties. There are often a large number of Excel workbook files that are being created and managed on day-to-day tasks, and in many cases, there's a lot of people that are providing input. They're collaborating on the same project, so you can end up with multiple versions. You can, have your file stored on the network. You can have additional copies floating around. There is a way that Excel gives us to include identifying information about a workbook and the files themselves. And so those are just some of the properties that we're going to discuss that are going to help us in these types of situations to find exactly what we need. So a workbook property is just a little bit of information. The technical term is metadata, and that just means data about data. You can also think of them as attributes. So if you have an object like an apple, then you would have attributes of that apple. It was crisp, it was sweet, it was tart. Those would be the attributes. Just like the properties define a workbook. They are attributes of that particular object. And so you can see information like who created the file, what time it was created, when the time it was last modified, who it was modified by. You can see all of that information in here. Excel generates a lot of these workbook properties automatically, like the date it was created and modified, the size, where it's currently at. But we can add other information. We can add tags in the workbook category. This will give me the ability to create custom properties to better suit my needs. The single and easiest way to view or modify workbook properties is on the Info tab, the Backstage view. So we get to the Backstage view and we select the Info tab, and most of your common properties are going to appear in the right-hand pane at that point. And some of these are automatically created and saved and updated by Excel. Others you can change. Properties that you can change are going to show up as text boxes, whereas the attributes there, it's not allowing me to change it because it is grayed out. You'll have the option to view all properties versus just a small number of properties there. The properties dialog box is divided into 5 tabs that allow you to work with it. Let's just hit what's on those tabs briefly. Summary. The General tab has general information about the workbook file. So we see the file type, we see its location, its size, when it was created, modified, and accessed, and then you have some system options down below. The Summary tab is going to have the default document properties that you can modify. So it'll be the title, author, keywords, comments, other tags there. Statistics has system level information about the workbook file. All those properties are updated automatically, created, modified, etc. Contents, the names of all the worksheets in the document, and any named cell ranges, those are also updated automatically. And then any custom commands you would have on the custom document properties. If you'd like to create workbook properties that'll help you, more specifically identify the file based on whatever processes, departments, terminology, etc., then that's when you create custom workgroup properties, or workbook, excuse me. There's a number of preset categories of these properties. You can also create your own completely unique properties. When you're on the custom tab, you type in a name, you choose add. You're going to choose the type. That's the name field. You can use either an existing name or you can type your own. The type drop-down box, you're going to have different options. Is it text, date, number values? Is it a yes/no option where somebody has to select one of 2 or 3 categories? And if so, what are the values? What are the properties? So you have the option to just kind of go through and add there what is necessary given your current circumstances. In this demonstration, we're going to look at some of the importance in workbook properties and just managing those. Sometimes it's just being able to view additional information. You might want to add custom properties to determine, say in this case, whether it's an approved final version. So we've got our spreadsheet open. We're just going to go over to the File tab to get us into the Backstage view. All right, and then notice here we've on the info tab, you've got several options, all right? And the properties are listed over here, but there are certain things that are missing. So for instance, if I want to give a title property, I can. Let's call it global sales data. Now the file name is already sales data global, okay? Global sales data, this is metadata. This is additional properties. And we can even add tags. And so we can use existing tags that we might already have, or we can create new tags. So we're just going to put several values here. I seem to have trouble with Canada for whatever reason. All right. And then just hit enter. And then all of those changes will be made. So it's adding each of those as an individual tag. Categories, if you want to add a category, then we'll just say that we want to do sales. Okay, and that is that's going to be what you have there. Now there are additional properties. Click on properties, advanced properties. Then it will open up the actual properties dialog box, and here we can go and create a custom property. So in the custom property, we're going to just say this is approved and final. You're then going to choose the type, and so it's text, date, number. We're just saying yes, no. The value is yes. We click add, and now that option is there. So let's just hit OK. And then we're going to close Excel. Now what you normally should be able to do here, let's save this. What we normally should be able to do is just access the start button and just type in something. Okay, now this is going to kind of depend on where this information is stored. It's going to depend on indexing options as well. Okay, but notice it did actually find it. This is the best match that it comes up with. All right. If necessary, you might have needed to say documents if you had some pictures or something else that showed up. But no, this is the sales data. Actually, that's P2. Let's see. That's European sales here. I'm saying it is just because it's Excel 2019, but that didn't actually find it. So let's click on that. There we go. Sales data global does show up. That's actually the one that we were dealing with. We can select that and it will open. All right. So it allowed us to search based on data or tags. Metadata, which are those tags, and the custom properties as well. So that's the benefit to using that additional metadata, is because in conjunction with indexing, it's going to make it easier to find information that you have saved. In this chapter, we looked at managing workbooks. We managed worksheets, workbook views, workbook properties, all to help us keep those files more well-structured, more organized, give us the ability to compare data in a more efficient way, give us the ability to find and know exactly where our critical data is. The larger the workbooks, the more those skills will prove invaluable. In this section, we're going to take a look at adding borders and colors to worksheets. If you're advertising, you know that a variety of colors and design layouts can catch the eye. They can get you to focus on key elements. Well, we can utilize those same kind of strategies even if we're not trying to sell something. We're going to apply formatting in different ways to just draw the audience to whatever the important information is, while at the same time maintaining a level of professionalism. In this first topic, we're going to look at adding borders and colors to worksheets. These are going to help you to enhance the visual appeal of your worksheet as a whole, and they'll help you also to make certain data stand out more readily to the viewer. So it's pretty easy to distinguish one cell from another on an Excel worksheet because by default they're displayed with these grid lines, but you may want to distinguish between different areas in other ways. You may not always want to have empty spaces between them. And so Excel gives us a number of different border formatting options, so you can identify the borders that you want to be created. You're going to use the border tab in the Format Cells dialog box in order to do this. And here we see 4 different examples. We have a border around the entire block. Then we have top and bottom borders. Then we have individual grid lines, including vertical grid lines. And the last one we have almost nothing, just some light grid lines. And so it really is going to be completely up to you. And so you can use some of your artistic flair, if you want, to just figure out the way that best focuses on the appropriate data. To quickly apply border formatting to worksheet cells, you're going to use the options in the Borders drop-down menu. It's important to note that you select most of these, it will apply the formatting to the selected cell, and it'll do so based on color and style options that are in your line color and line style menus. Those are actually located down at the bottom. They're line color, line style. You can choose thickness and things like of that nature if you want to adjust those. In the drop-down menu itself, you just see you have different types of borders, all borders, outside, bottom, top, thick, thin. You can make various changes there, and you can see those changes implemented immediately. You can access a few more options for formatting on the Border tab of the Format Cells dialog box. Here you have all of the same formatting options that we've seen, just a slightly different way that you would go about doing that. It also displays the border preview and then the border toggle switches. So you see line styles, you see the colors, you basically have all these options. Like I said, it's just kind of a different way to configure them. In addition, you have the fill options. This is a kind of a colorful way to draw attention. So it's a type of worksheet formatting that's going to allow you to add colors, patterns, gradient shading to the background of a cell. So you simply select the cells that you want to use, and then you can use the drop-down menu, which is right there on the Home tab in the font group, or you can use the Fill tab on the Format Cells dialog box. Here's a look at that Fill tab. You can see pattern colors, pattern styles, background colors, fill effects. Just kind of start clicking around in there and you'll be able to see all of the different options that you have. And the final option that you have is the ability to add a picture as a worksheet background. And these are background images, not technically part of the worksheet. They're for display purposes only. They're not even going to print. Just go to Page Layout in the Page Setup group. There's a background command, and you can utilize that. Obviously, be careful. This is for example purposes. We don't think this is necessarily the best background to include. But as I said, you do have some artistic capabilities in Excel for the general purpose of them kind of pointing out the really important data to your audience. In this chapter, we talked about adding borders and colors to worksheets. Not only will these help you to just enhance the overall visual appeal of the worksheet, but it'll also help you to make certain data stand out, whether it's borders around the individual cells or entire ranges of cells, or fills inside the background of the cells or even the worksheet itself. This helps you to make that data stand out and just create more professional looking worksheets. In this section, we're going to look at Excel's ability to be customized. Now, because the user interface is designed to be as accessible as possible and to a very broad audience, so some of us may regularly use certain sets of commands that other people barely touch. And so we have access to some customization and are going to take a look at general options. In this first topic, we're just dealing with customizing general options and the Excel user interface. You can adjust and configure the global system settings by using the Excel options dialog box that you see here. It's divided into a series of tabs shown vertically on the left, and you access this by just clicking the File tab to go to your Backstage view and then choosing the Options tab. General settings are going to allow you to adjust the display of on-screen elements, toolbars, etc. Formulas for configuring formula, calculation, error checking settings. Data for configuring options for importing data and doing data analysis. You can also get data from elsewhere, so there's some legacy data import wizards there. Proofing is where you would have autocorrect settings, spell check settings, your dictionaries. You can configure your save options, your language options. And then advanced is going to have all manner of settings that directly affect a variety of common Excel tasks. Followed by that, though, you have the customized ribbon and quick access toolbar. So this is where we're going to be able to modify the command groups and the tabs and even add our own tabs if you want. Add-ins shows additional add-ins for extra Excel features, and the Trust Center is where we configure our privacy and security settings. So here's a look at the Customize Ribbon tab in the Excel Options dialog box. It lets you modify the ribbon, so all the commands you use are right where you need them. You can rearrange the existing ribbon tabs. You can create a new tab. You can rename tabs. You can remove commands. I mean, you do need to be careful just to remember that you've done this and you don't want to hide the commands, but pretty easy there. Choose the commands from the drop-down menu. Choose on the right, to the right of that, the ribbon tab that you are trying to work with. Okay. You see new tab, new group, renaming, pulling commands in. So just the idea is to make sure that the common commands that you want, you have direct access to. You can also customize the ribbon hierarchy. It's arranged in a hierarchy. The top level will represent the tabs, so home, insert, page layout, formulas, and data. And then beneath there, you have the individual command groups. Okay, so a group is like clipboard, individual commands, drop-down menu items, and others. You're familiar with the Quick Access toolbar. That is the toolbar that appears at the top left of your window, and you can adjust the Quick Access toolbar from here as well. Okay, it's just instead of a customized ribbon, you're on the Quick Access toolbar tab, but notice it's essentially a very, very similar way in which you can add commands, reorder the commands, etc. The other way of doing it, of course, is just to click the drop-down, the little arrow in the Quick Access toolbar, and then you can adjust what's there. You really first have to make something available. If it's not already in the Quick Access toolbar, in other words, it's not already in this list, then you need to make it available. You can also do that by clicking on More Commands down at the bottom of this drop-down box. In this chapter, we looked at some basic Excel customization by using the File tab and getting into the Excel options. You have a number of different options that are available to you that control the Excel user interface. So we saw things like proofing and spell checking, autocorrect options, customizing toolbars, the ribbon, the quick access toolbar, and others. All of these are going to help you to sort of tailor Excel to your particular liking, and in the long run,